Amen. You can have a seat. How do I pray? What is acceptable to pray? How honest can I be in prayer? The Psalms will answer this. How do I realign myself to God? How do I let Him renew my mind? How do I develop a heart that's for God? The Psalms will accomplish this. How do I find God? How can I know who He is? How can I meet with Him? The Psalms is the pathway to this. How do I live my life on the right path? How do I live in a way that leads to flourishing? The Psalms will show us. The Psalms does for us that which no other book can do. It's not meant to be studied in the same way as Romans or Revelation. It's not meant to be a story that's told in the same way as Luke or Jonah. Rather, it's meant to be experienced, to be felt, to be wrestled with. One writer in reference to Psalms says that in life we tend to form mental ruts. And we think in these familiar, well-worn paths that are very hard to get out of through logic or reasoning. And what good poetry does is force you off of the familiar path into new territory. Because here's what is true. Psalms will meet you where you're at. Psalms will grieve with you in your grief and celebrate with you in your celebration. But Psalms is not just trying to relate to you. It's also trying to change you. The book of Psalms will change us. It's meant to shape us, to lead us towards life and flourishing. This is the book of Psalms, and this is where we're going to be for the summer as a church. To put it quite simply, a psalm is like a spiritual song or a hymn. Now, it's the book of Psalms, but it means that there are individual psalms. So like Psalm 1, it's not Psalms 1, it's Psalm 1. We'll get our language all on the same page here. It's the longest book in the Bible, it holds the longest chapter in the Bible. It's 150 different songs or poems broken into 5 sections or books within the bigger book of Psalms. And those 5 kind of parallel to some degree the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It's written by a whole bunch of different authors. But at the end of the day, the Psalms is a prayer book. And it's a prayer book written by a whole bunch of different people from a whole bunch of different perspectives, going through a whole bunch of different circumstances. And it's them crying out to God in their grief, in their celebration, in their questioning, in their wrestling. It's a prayer book, and it's designed to help us, the people of God, learn how to pray. It's designed to help us to better understand how do we actually walk out life trying to follow God in a broken world that doesn't. And so as we go through this series, going through the book of Psalms written from different people and different experiences, you're actually going to hear from different people with different perspectives, different experiences, multiple voices, experiences, perspectives, people with different areas of challenge, and people with different areas of having experienced grace. That's going to be us for the summer. And I do think it's worth noting right out of the gate that this series will feel a little bit different. We're not like studying through the book like verse by verse in the same way that we have with other books. Even today, like an example of this, like we're not starting in Psalm 1. We're actually starting in Psalm 16. So if you want to be going in order, you've got some catching up to do. But this series is going to feel a little bit different. The people that are going to be preaching these sermons are going to be speaking a little bit more from their experience. Our experience with wrestling, what does it look like to talk to God? Because our faith is not meant to just be built on hearing and learning and listening. It's actually meant to go both ways. Our prayer life is not just us listening to God, it's also us responding to God, to speaking to Him. Do you know that even in a setting like this in church, Even though I'm the one speaking to you, they're actually like, we engage with each other in worship. We engage with each other in the sermon. It meant to go both ways. And the book of Psalms helps us to see the ways that we can choose to engage with God in prayer. So as much as this is a series through the book of Psalms, really this is a series on prayer. And our hope is that this will grow our consistency, the breadth of, and the depth of our prayer life communally as a church. So it's the book of Psalms. Now, if you were to tell me a year ago that we were preaching through the book of Psalms and I had to preach part of it, I'd been like, boring. Because I've done the Bible in a year. I've done where you're trying to get through the Bible and you get to Psalms and it's like, oh man, I got to read 40 Psalms today or whatever it is. And that's just like not a whole lot of fun. And even growing up when I was younger, it's like, I want these Old Testament stories. I want to hear about what the Israelites did, or I want reading about Jesus and all the things that he did, or I just want something simple. I just want Paul to tell me what to do and I'll go do it and it'll be easy. You get to the Psalms and it's not quite as simple. It's more nuanced. And if I've learned anything over the past while, it's that to actually get anything out of Psalms, you actually have to sit with it. A psalm is not super useful at just a quick reading over. It's meant to be wrestled with. It's poetic. It's like poetry comes to life when you spend time in it. Psalms is the same. Now, I said a year ago, if you asked me about Psalms, I wouldn't have loved the idea. But, and this is coincidental, in January, I was trying to figure out how to kind of create some new rhythms in my own personal walk with Jesus. And in listening through some preachers that I respect, one of them suggested start every morning in a psalm. And so I did. From January 1st till now, most mornings, I've started my day in a psalm. And I've got to be honest, it's had a transformative effect on my time with Jesus. Because like that quote said earlier, we tend to get into mental ruts. Whether we're thinking this in the same patterns, or maybe we find ourselves, we're often praying the same kinds of things. Psalms is blows that all wide open. It increases our perspective on what's possible to pray. There's things in Psalms where it's I'm allowed to pray that? David said that to God? It's it challenges me. It stretches me out. It's it pulls me into this idea that, I actually can be fully honest with God. Or there's other times where I was God, I want to be with you, but to be honest, I just don't have any language today. I'm not coming up with anything. I want to pray, I want to speak, but there's just nothing there. Psalms would give me language. So I found the book of Psalms to be incredibly beneficial for me. So when AJ said we're working through it, I was awesome. Can't wait. Because Psalms meets us where we're at. On the mountain or in the valley, in celebration or grief, Psalms comforts, corrects, motivates, inspires, and ultimately aligns us back to God to better see who we are, who God is, and what is really true about the world. Psalms brings God to the forefront. The Psalms help us to experience him in an increasing measure. So this is the book of Psalms. This is where we'll be for the summer. As I was preparing for this, I got Lyme disease. 10 out of 10, do it, not recommend. But here's the thing, I used to be kind of because I grew up, I didn't have ticks. There wasn't ticks when I grew up. I was in the woods all the time. Then I come here and apparently there's ticks everywhere. And you get a little intimidated to go in the woods. I feel like I've crossed that hurdle now. I did it. I got the tick. I got Lyme disease. Now I'm part of the South Shore. I can live here holistically. It's perfect. But I got the spot and everything, and so I went into the doctor, and they prescribed me with a medication. They're yeah, you definitely have Lyme. Here's these. You should take them. They're oh, by the way, be careful. This medication will make you photosensitive. And I was not a problem. I don't really like getting my picture taken. It's going to be all right. Because I've talked to a lot of people now asking what that means. And it's a bunch of you have this encyclopedia of medical knowledge and terms. Whatever school that came from, I didn't have it. So I had to ask, like, what does this mean? And they're like, well, it means basically you're like sun sensitive. I don't know why they don't just call it sun sensitive, because that would explain better what it is. But I still didn't fully have my head wrapped around what this meant until I went outside in the sun. And I started to understand what it meant. And it was like the sun felt hotter, like it seemed brighter. It like burned my skin more quickly. But because of this medication, it made me more photosensitive, so it meant that I experienced the sun like more. I don't know how to describe it other than that. The sun was just more, hotter, brighter, more burning. And maybe this is like a cheesy segue, but I actually think Psalms does the same thing. The book of Psalms, when I'm spending time in it, it makes me more aware of God around me and God in me. It makes me more photosensitive. It makes me more God sensitive. It makes me more God conscious. It's like the effects of God around me are just more true, more lively, more brilliant. And so if you're in a spot where you're like feeling a little bit dead, or like you know God's there, but you're not really experiencing him personally, it's like Psalms is the medication to experience God more holistically in our lives. And so I'm really excited for this series. I know like these songs, these hymns, these poems have been a game changer for me, and I believe that they will be for us. So we're going to start, we're going to kind of like everything I just said, it's hopefully going to be true of this text that we're going to jump into. Psalm 16. For those of you who like the fun facts, this psalm is quoted by Peter in Acts 2. So, famous little psalm in the Bible world. And in verse 1, it says, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge." I said this series is going to be a little bit more testimonial. I've been trying to pray through this psalm a fair bit over the last little while in preparation for this. There's a lot of days I don't get past this first line very quickly. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. What a gift of a prayer. Because my tendency is to believe that I preserve myself and I am my own refuge. I've got my life under control. I've got it figured out. I've got a plan. I can sustain myself. I can preserve myself. And it doesn't take very long of living that way before I get myself into a little bit of a bind. It's like my thoughts are that I can do it. The felt, experienced reality is that, oh boy, I need God to preserve me. I need God to sustain me. And one thing that you're going to learn about the book of Psalms is that it requires honesty. You see, Psalms only works when we're willing to be honest about where we're actually at, be honest about what's going on in our mind, be honest about our need and the places where we fall short, to be honest with our wrestling, to be honest with our questions, to be honest with our problems with God. Psalms requires honesty. And the more honest we're willing to be with this book and with God, the more we will get out of it. For me, it was being willing to be honest with God, saying, all right, I like to think I've got it under control, but God, really, I need you to preserve me. Like, I somehow deleted my sermon notes this week permanently. I don't know how. Everything auto-saves. Should have been simple, but I did. I can't even preserve my own sermon notes, let alone preserve my own life. I need God to help me. Even I can think I've got it under control, I often don't. But that whole idea, like there might be some of you who you're actually in a space where you need a refuge, where maybe life's kind of beat you up a little bit, or maybe life's not going how you wanted it to, or maybe there's been some situations where it's really just got you beat down. Jesus comes along and says, I'll be your refuge. But for us, it's like, are we willing to actually go to him for that? Are we willing to say, God, I need you to sustain me. I need you to preserve me. I need you to be my refuge. That's a prayer that we are given in Psalms. And that might even be for some of us right now. It's like, God, things aren't working out so well. Things feel unsafe and shaky for me. God, would you be my refuge? I believe that you can be. Game changer. To be able to say that, to offload that, and to trust him with it, man. And that's just in verse 1. We got 150 chapters of this. In verse 2, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. One thing that you'll find in Psalms is that it's constantly resetting our perspective. And praying the Psalms will give us renewed perspective. It's one of the things that it does. It's this reminder that all the good things we have come from God. And in starting off, if we're able to acknowledge that, yes, God, I need you. I can't do it on my own. And then also to say, God, I believe that every good and perfect gift comes from you. Oh man, that's a great starting point. Psalms realigns us. It recenters us. It renews our perspective. Because often we can be so focused on all the negative things going on in our life. Psalms can kind of help us to take a step back and say, no, there's all kinds of good things in my life. And if I'm being honest, they come from God. Verse 3. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. You know, we're actually supposed to enjoy being together as the saints in the land. Verse 4, the sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out or take their names on my lips. This is one of those ones that you often kind of just brush off because I'm not struggling with the blood stuff, so that's fine. I don't really have to worry about this. But as I was processing this out, it's the sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. Well, what does it mean to run after another god? It's we think of all these different mystical things, but what are the things that are taking the place of God? What are the things that are becoming God in your life? Whether it's relationship or finances or substances or certain hobbies or ways you spend your time. These things can become God in our life. These things that often they fill a void that we feel. And there's a sense that it's I feel these needs in my life, so I'm going to find a solution to it over here. And there's these things that all look nice and flashy, and for a moment they satisfy. But Psalm steps in and says, actually be cautious. Because the sorrows of those who run after another god shall multiply. And it might seem good up front, but you might actually find yourself worse off than when you started. And praying through the Psalms, one of the beautiful things it does is that the Psalms reminds us that not all paths lead to life. The Psalms kind of start to paint this picture, and we'll see this more in some of the other Psalms, but it doesn't all work. Not every path leads to flourishing. Not every path leads to life. And the Psalms helps remind us of that. Verse 5. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. I love this part. I know I said we're not going to really study Psalms, but there's a little bit here. What does it mean that the Lord is, it's David writing this. What does it mean that the Lord is his chosen portion? Well, a portion, when the Israelites were going into the promised land, they were all given a portion of land. There's their inheritance. But the Levites were 1/12 of the group that were set aside for God's work. And in Numbers 18, God says that I am your portion and your inheritance among the people of Israel. And when a biblical author says God is my portion, he's basically saying that God is the source of my happiness. God is the source of all that I need. God is like some of the other groups, they're getting their portion of land and livestock and fields, but the others are given their portion is God. It's like these other groups are getting what they need from the land. God's saying, you're going to get what you need from me. And what's so beautiful about this is that David didn't need to do this. Like, God didn't say this to David. David is saying, you are my chosen portion. Of all of the things that the world has to offer, of all of the things that I can achieve on my own, God, you are my portion. Of all of the other things that could satisfy, of all the other things that could meet my need, instead of turning to them, I'm turning to you, Lord, and I'm saying, you are my portion. I trust you. I trust that you will care for me. I trust that you will meet my needs. I trust that you will fulfill the desires of my heart. Jesus, you are my portion. And I love it that David says, chosen portion. He chooses it. And you'll find that praying through the Psalms will put you into a position of having to make choices. Praying the Psalms presents us with choices. Is the Lord your portion? Is the Lord my portion? What are the things in my life that I'm turning to for the source of my fulfillment and my satisfaction? Are there things that I'm turning to because ultimately at the end of the day I'm trusting those things more than I'm trusting him and what he can provide? We all are pitted with the question of, is the Lord our portion? Have we chosen him? And then verse 6 following, it says, the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. And I believe these two sections fit right together. And I almost breezed over this point because I'm always hesitant with how some of these things come across from the stage. But I just have to say this as a testimony that it's true. I have experienced this in my own life. That in the moments where I have surrendered my will, my desires, my hopes to Jesus, in the moments where I've said, no, God, you are my portion, I'm trusting you. And that hasn't been every time. I'm not saying I get that right all the time, by no means. But in the areas of my life that I have surrendered to him, I can say with confidence, in those spaces, the lines have fallen for me in beautiful places. Even I was walking in my yard of the house that Taylor and I bought earlier this year. And I've always had kind of a picture of what I want my yard to be like, way more so than my house. And we didn't really get to, the place is super overgrown, and so we didn't really get to take a good look until we were actually closing on the house. And God had kind of felt like we had been praying, and God had kind of made a bunch of things fall into place. We were trusting him with it. And I'm on the property, and I'm walking around, and I'm looking, and I can't believe it, because I'm realizing, this is what I've always kind of wanted. But I didn't know it. I was trusting God with some things, not really knowing what the outcome was going to be, and then realizing in the moment that, God came through. And there's been time and time in my life where I've tried to do things my own way, and it's really just not worked out so well. And time in my life where I have said, no, God, you are my chosen portion. I'm going to trust you. And in the act of doing so, God is so faithful to show up in the midst of that. Not always how I expect, not always exactly how I want, but I can look back when I'm reflecting over my life and say with confidence, the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. And here's the thing, I forget that all the time. I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. I need the Psalms to bring my mind back to remembering the goodness of God in my life. Because I will so quickly move on to the next thing, start asking for the next thing, and forget what it was that God did. Praying the Psalms reminds us of the goodness of God. Verse 7. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. I hit a section like this in the Psalms and my mind goes to, all right, God, where have I not placed you at my right hand? Because here's the thing. I can't afford to not have him there. Because it doesn't say, because of my financial security, I will not be shaken. It doesn't say, because of my good health, I will not be shaken. It doesn't say, because I've got a 10-year plan perfectly figured out, I will not be shaken. It doesn't say any of that. No, why? Because those things can still be shaken. Those things aren't actually great things to put a whole lot of confidence in because they can change tomorrow. It says, because God is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. So for me, it's like, all right, God, I need you there. What do I need to do to get you there? One of the ways I was thinking about this recently is when it comes to like tithing. And it's like always, people are always like, it's always weird to talk about money in church and everybody gets awkward and takes a step back. But here's the thing, how I've experienced this. Tithing for me has not been about like so much on the end of like sacrificing. It's been way more on the end of, God, I'm going to trust you with this because you say like, if I trust you with this, you will provide all that I need. And I want to be positioned in a place where it's not dependent on me. Because if I'm trusting myself with my finances, it's dependent and weighted on me. And I know that I will be shaken. So for me, it's like, God, I have to give this to you. I've got to give this to you because I don't trust myself with it. I don't want to be in a position where it's weighing on me. I want to be in a position where you're the one that's carrying it. And that's true of finances. That's true of my marriage. That's true of making decisions in my life. I don't want to make a decision that God's not in because I've done that before. It's I need him at my right hand. So it's like, God, in what areas of my life have I not put you there? In what areas of my life am I not putting you first? In what areas of my life am I not trusting you? God, help me to reconcile these things. It's a prayer generated out of the Psalms that realigns us with God, that puts him at his right place in our life so that we can walk in confidence knowing that he's the one that carries the weight. Verse 9. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. And this is the last verse, the best verse of this whole psalm. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. You see, God's desire for your life and my life is that we would flourish. The book of Psalms, really, as we continue to go through it, it paints the picture of two paths. That there's a path that leads to life and flourishing, and there's a path that leads to death and destruction. And praying the Psalms leads us on the path of flourishing. But here's the thing. Our relationship with Jesus will be largely hinged or impacted by whether or not we believe verse 11 to be true. Because if we believe that Jesus died on the cross to forgive us our sins so that we can go to heaven when we die, and if that is the extent of our view of the gospel, that will call us to live a certain way. But if we believe that all of those things are true, as well as God has painted us this picture of being able to walk a path that leads to flourishing, that he actually promises to make known to us the path of life. He promises that in his presence there is fullness of joy, and at his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. We have to believe that. Because so often we get stuck in a rut of all of the things that God's asking us to not do. We get stuck caught in processing all of the no's and all of the I can'ts and all of the struggles, when on the other side God's saying, yeah, there's a path that leads to destruction, and I'm going to give you some reminders to stay off of it. But let's not focus there. Let's focus on this path that leads to life. That line, it says, in your presence there's fullness of joy. I've experienced I think flickers of that in my life. But I never fully grasped what it meant, and maybe I still don't. But earlier this year, Tom Cann and I went to a conference in New York, and it was a conference on prayer. Believe it or not, they talked a lot about the Psalms. And in that conference, it was incredible. It was life-changing, legitimately. But there's one of the sessions that just didn't resonate with me to the same degree as the others. A bunch of people are up at the front getting prayed over, and they're having a great time. And I was just sitting in my chair by myself, an uncomfortable chair in a kind of ugly auditorium. The music wasn't that great. And all of a sudden, there's this overwhelming sense of the presence of God. And I think I must have looked like an idiot because I was sitting there by myself with a huge grin on my face. And in that moment, I believe I experienced fullness of joy. And what that did in me is, it was a great moment. I didn't want to leave it. But it helped me to see that, what God has to offer is actually better. Because I like excitement, I like adventure, I like thrill, and I've done a lot of those things. That moment sitting in that seat in a little theater in New York was so much better than anything else I've experienced. And it was God saying to me, this is what I have for you. There's more to be experienced of me than what you've experienced up until this point. And that moment for me, it shifted my prayers. Because now when I read Psalm 16, verse 11, it's, God, I believe you have this for me. Would you show me the path? God, I believe that what you have for me is better than anything I could get for myself. Would you just show me the path? And God, when I get off track, when I lose my way, which I know I'm going to do, would you realign me back to you? Because no matter how many times I turn away, I always find that road leads to destruction. Jesus, would you put me on the path that leads to life?